Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Catholic Youth of Monterey podcast. Our third episode was inspired by a question many of the youth from our diocese have asked. How do I know God is real? Our host, Scott Dimler, will be joined by Karen Schindler, who is the campus minister at San Luis Obispo's Newman Catholic Center and holds a master's degree in theological studies on marriage and family from the Pontifical Institute of John Paul II at the Catholic University of America. As young adults, we are discovering new things every day. But how do we begin to discover God in our life? How do we go from seeking worldly things to fulfill our heart's desires to seeking God? So join us as our guest, Karen, explains how God becomes more real to us when we make our relationship with Him more real.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our yet-to-be-named young adult podcast presented to you by the Diocese of Monterey. Today, I have a very special guest, Karen Schindler, who is I want to get this right, are you a professor at Cal Poly SLO or a lecturer?
Oh, no, actually.
Okay, please introduce yourself then for everybody.
Yeah, no, I was just saying I got my master's in theological studies from the Pontifical Institute of John Paul II for studies on marriage and the family at the Catholic University of America. That's the full name.
Okay.
And it was just the end of my 2 years there, and it was time to find a job. And I knew I wanted to live in California in the Central Coast. And I just looked for jobs. I was looking for a director of faith formation at a parish or some kind of ministry job. And I found this opening at the Newman Center and got the job. And I just have loved every second of it, working with college students. And my favorite part is just teaching them about their faith. And the lecture that you saw was the fruit of a decision that I had, or a realization that I had come to in my conversations with the students, that really so many college students don't know their faith. They just don't know what to believe. I just thought, well, I'll just make my confirmation classes available to everybody. And then COVID happened, and then one thing led to another. And there, and he's so good at technology, or putting things together, so he decided, well, let's make it a forum and create our own YouTube channel. And so that's how that all started.
That's great.
I'm no speaker celebrity by any stretch, but
Awesome. Yeah, I watched one of the forums you have, and people can find that on the SLO's Newman YouTube page if they want to watch that. And I don't want you to have to regurgitate everything you said there, but if you wouldn't mind regurgitating it just a little bit for us today. So today we're talking about how do we know that God is real? I think that's a question a lot of people have, no matter where in the world they were raised, what religion they had or lack thereof growing up. That's a question even I asked myself. And I did the classic, God, I gave myself on this weekend retreat, you owe me, now it's your turn, show yourself.
Yeah.
And so I had a moment like that. But from your point of view, what would you say to somebody who asked that question? Well, how do we know God is real?
Oh, gee. Yeah, that's interesting because, I have a brother who grew up in the same faith that I did. There were a lot of problems with the faith. It was one of these extremely traditionalist, fundamentalist, even type of religions, or it was an offshoot of the Catholic religion.
Oh.
In fact, we broke off from the church. We weren't with the Pope. We didn't recognize legitimacy of all the popes after Vatican II. Anyway, this could be a real tangent.
I've heard of a couple of those Catholic offshoots. I think there's a liberal Catholic church or something one's called. Very interesting.
Oh, well, these are really conservative ones. The Society of St. Pius X is one. anyway, we were one of those, so pretty radical, but our view of God was very toxic. It was very shame-based, fear-based. And as a result, a lot of my friends have their faith, but one of my brothers has real struggles with being in God too. And I'm sure it had everything to do with the way God was to him. And it is a real challenge to try to convince him that God does exist. That's something that everybody has to come to grips with on their own, completely on their own within their hearts. And they can look at all sorts of reasons for believing in God. But ultimately, I think it does come to, the intellectual part isn't enough. There is a time in your heart where you just, like there's an inward revelation that you just know this person is real, that there is somebody out there to whom you owe whole existence, and a person you really long for in the depths of your being, the fulfillment of all your desires, that one thing that's gonna really answer all those questions that you have, fulfill those desires, etc. I think there just has to be that aha moment. All that being said, though, you do have to be convinced intellectually there's a God, that it's very reasonable to believe that there is one. And that's where I think it's good to pursue, okay, what are the proofs for the existence of God that the Christian faith offers,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that, because our faith is not just purely based on feelings,
right.
like some people might think about, well, any religion. There's an intellectualism to it, and where your faith might start with that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
it also requires you to do more. Just like how people like to say, love isn't a feeling, it's an action. You can feel that love, but if you don't show it, you're really loving somebody. And I think people really are looking for that intellectual side, but people often are looking for, this hard, concrete kind of proof, where they're saying like, okay, like show me like the picture, the video, like the thing that has been touched by God that's still glowing with holiness.
I know. No, it's absolutely true, especially in this day and age, because we are such a scientific, technological age or culture.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that's real, quote unquote, is that which can be quantified or measured or seen in a lab. And and we're sort of out of touch with our spiritual side, and there's nothing really in the culture that fosters that spiritual side, or it writes it off as just religion, and then religion becomes something completely different than science.
And it writes off as something relative as well, just to,
Yes.
oh, well, you believe that, I believe this.
Exactly. And since it's so separated from the world of reason or science, it can be relative, right? Because it's not really grounded in anything logical or rational. It's all feeling, as you said. So yes, that is really the challenge of our age. And the short answer is, you're not going to get a proof like that.
Okay, I think we just disappointed some people.
Yeah, you just aren't. You cannot by God. You cannot measure him. No, he is in a realm. He is beyond that which can be measured and quantified, right? And thank heaven.
Yeah.
Because what a productive way to view God. I mean, don't we want something that is beyond science that we can't measure and grasp? Because I don't know, I think we would be disappointed if ultimately God turned out to be just like everything else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it too, like with the idea of heaven. I've explained to some of my teens in my confirmation program and even friends of mine where they're like, yeah, like I hope there's like this in heaven or that in heaven, like a basketball court. And it's just like, listen, if you need anything else in heaven besides God to be happy, then you're not in heaven.
Well, right. What I was hanging out with some college students just the other day, and we were at a bar and somebody had ordered these fries. He said, "This is just it, right? These fries, they're Cajun fries or something." And he said, "The ultimate dish, and this is what heaven is." And then one student, promptly put him in his place. Said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "Here's the thing. Every lovely thing on earth, even if it's, something like fries, anything good, whether we taste it, we hear it, we see it, we feel it, it's all an aspect of God,
Yes.
a material manifestation of him. So that when we get to heaven, we are have that, but just that and such more,
Yes. Okay. Let me see if I can compare it to an analogy, or maybe not an analogy, more of a story from my father. So you said like we can, compare God, or not compare God, but see God through the things that are of him, so like his creations.
Yes.
So I remember back in middle school, I went over to a friend's house for a sleepover, and then I was home the next day, and my friend's mom called my house phone, talked to my dad, and just told my dad like how lovely I was, and that I was a great guest, and I did nothing wrong, and I was a joy to have. Tooting my own horn a little bit. But so my dad gets off the phone, tells me that, and I was like a little full of myself. I'm like, yeah, Dad, like, you're welcome. Like that, I'm such a great son. And he was like, what? He's like, no. That had nothing to do with you. I'm like, well, what do you mean that had nothing to do with me? Like, I was a great guest. Like, I'm a good person. He goes, no, I raised you to be that way. Like, you are from me. That was a compliment to me for raising you well.
Yes. What very wise dad, your
Yes.
dad. Yes. No, that's absolutely true. One of the points I made in one of the theology forums I did about God is that he's very humble. And that's a kind of a strange attribute to God, because we typically talk, hear of him in the Bible as someone who's jealous of his glory.
Yeah.
Right? And he will admit of no other lover and that kind of thing. But he really is very, very humble. And that is because he hides behind his creation. Because when you experience God, you don't experience him directly ever. A beautiful hike in a starry sky, a beautiful flower or a bird, or a plate of Cajun fries.
Yes.
These are all ways that he reveals himself to us, but he always reveals us or himself to us through another, or through something else. And that's what is so humble about him.
Yeah, he lets kind of an artist letting the art speak for themselves, whether it be a song or a painting, kind of like terrible analogy, like Banksy. Like, I don't think we know his face or anything, but he is so mysterious and an amazing artist because of the work he produces without even knowing who or what this person is.
Yeah. Well, and the art itself, I'm sure, speaks so much about him, maybe even more than just his normal appearance or his appearance,
Much and, like God's creation speaks so much about God without needing for him to reveal himself explicitly.
Exactly. Yeah. And yes, I think I don't think you can gainsay that.
Yeah. And that's something that I learn more and more about the older and older I get, especially when it comes to creation being like showing what you are. I'm not a musician, but I play guitar. I love to sing. I want to be in a band without all the work. of it,
Mm-hmm.
and I love the idea of creating. And in high school and early college, I did a bunch of film stuff, and even now with a podcast, like I enjoy creating and putting myself out in that way. But it's
Mm-hmm.
different when we talk about the Father because, well, he's a father, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's something you don't understand until you are these things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think when I was in high school, first rediscovering my faith, because a little background, I went to a private Catholic school where, like you said, like the idea of like philosophy and religion, that was just like a class and a homework to me. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
always mean that much, but then I got to experience that feeling and that
Mm-hmm.
personal relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think at that age of 15, where I rediscovered that faith, I couldn't have viewed it in that way. I was
Mm-hmm.
focused more on Jesus, the Son, whereas now I'm focusing more on the Father, the Creator Himself, because I'm
Yeah.
moving more towards that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and then Jesus came to show us the Father, right?
Yes.
So the Father is ultimately it. But yeah, I think you were saying about I've come to have this urge to really study my faith again or get in contact with that. You must have had some kind of urge to do that, or
Yeah.
some question that needed to be answered, something in your heart or your mind that wasn't being fulfilled in any other way.
Yes, that is an apt way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was searching for a God, back
Yes.
then. I desired God, but he was something um like that I was difficult to attain, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people asking this question, how do we know that God is real, are searching for the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think even atheists and agnostics that seek out goodness, they are seeking out God at the end of the day. Or even the people with the crystals and astrology and wanting all those
Mm-hmm.
things, like I see what you're seeking out,
Right.
seeking in the wrong place.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There is an innate tendency on the part of man for worship, right? And spirituality.
Yes.
And so it is really interesting that this New Age movement, or this movement for meditation and spiritual things,
Yeah,
has
spiritual but not
really,
religious.
yeah, but it's really just can or caught fire. And so many people are being drawn to this. And I think it's just really one of the greatest testimonies to the existence of something, at least something like, or something other worldly, that
Hmm.
we all have this innate tendency to, and that we innately desire, and we just simply can't be satisfied without it. And I really feel like that's the best indication, or maybe the strongest indication, that there has to be something else. And so what else would it be? Somebody or something that can fulfill all those desires, or that those tendencies. um yeah, I mean,
Yes.
if there's no God, how does any of that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it almost doesn't. This isn't just like a circular chain. Like there is a beginning point. Maybe
Right.
so far back we can't see it anymore. But this is not just a case of Ouroboros. It's never ending and consuming itself. That this is there is a cause, a source of
Yes.
things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and that gets to Aquinas's 5 proofs for the existence of God, right?
Yes, yeah. You mentioned those in the forum.
Yeah. I mean, did you want me to run through them again, or?
If you would want to, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because St. Thomas didn't set out to prove that that we can reason to a God because everything had a beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people misread his 5 proofs as thinking that Aquinas was trying to prove that everything had a beginning. And so then you get these people, these prominent atheists like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins or whatever, who are experts in science. And they say, well, in fact, you don't need a beginning. You could posit this possibility or whatever. But Thomas Aquinas is brilliant. Go beyond that. What they're just pointing to is that there's movement in creation, right? Mm-hmm. Movement meaning a growth, not just a growth, but a direction towards which that growth is developing. If that's true, if there is this movement and this direction toward which the movement is developing, it implies, first of all, that there's some kind of plan or form that we're developing into, okay? That and these forms and plans are intelligible, okay? There's to them or a design. So where does the order and design come from? That's one question. And then another question would be, where does the motion come from? It certainly doesn't come from ourselves, right? Because we got the motion from something else. We got it from our parents initially, and then we continue to get it from food, water, sunlight, everything else, you know, and then we eventually lose it. So this motion can't be inherent to our being. We get it from something else. Well, that's true of everything. I mean, if we were just in the middle of the universe for 100 years and just observe everything around us, we would see that it's not just true for us, it's true for everything. But then that means logically that there has to be somebody or something where the motion comes from that doesn't depend on anything else.
Okay, motion. That doesn't have its own cause.
Exactly, because otherwise you're going to have this infinite regress, you know, that circle that you were talking about. Well, yeah. What started the circle? Where does the circle of motion get its motion in the first place? So, you know, I think that's a very a logical, anyone with any scientific mind would just take a minute to think about that. He would come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, we're dependent beings. And that's another one of Aquinas's proofs, the proof from contingency or dependence. We're all dependent on something else for our existence. We can't be dependent on another dependent being, because then that dependent being has to be dependent on something else. In other words, you get the infinite regress again. So
absolutely,
on what independent being are we dependent? You know? So it's all very logical there.
I see that. I like that. It's even why you can't put all your faith and trust in another human being, you know, who might start a movement or something. Like, they are fallible at the end of the day. They are dependent on other things too, and aren't perfect.
Yeah.
I like that. So I want to move on though to my next question for you. We're talking about a lot of the theological, intellectual sides of how do we know God is real, but I'd love to hear from you a little bit personally, like how you know God is real. Because I think people too are searching for that relational, faith-based aspect of this question as well. And you mentioned that you grew up in a religious household, though very conservative. But what did you have those times where you faltered, where you didn't believe, had to come back? What was your journey like to really know that God is real?
Yeah. Well, I may not be the most helpful person to talk to in this respect, only from the standpoint that I don't know that I've ever had a serious doubt about the existence of God.
But that's fine too. You don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, it has occurred to me at certain times. Okay, what if there isn't a God? What if this is all just matter energy, and we're just going to fade out of existence when we die. But it just never seemed very it just never seemed very reasonable to me, or something credible. So I just dismiss it. So it's just always made sense to me that there's a God. I know that there is a person that on whom, and person is kind of a reductive way to say it, because when you say person, you're kind of anthropomorphizing something or somebody. You're making him like a man. But this person is beyond a person, an individual person, right?
Yes.
He, something on which I got my existence, who fills my existence, who provides me with that existence, who sustains me all the time throughout all the troubles that I go through and the trials of life, and there have been many. And he is that I draw my peace and my strength and my courage. He gives me a reason to live, meaning to everything that happens in my life. And he makes his presence felt, especially when I take that quiet time during the day or night, and I just sit in the depths of my heart. I try to turn off all my thoughts in my head, and I go into my heart, and I just feel this real sense of peace. And it's a peace that comes from knowing that I'm not by myself. I'm not in this by myself. I'm not alone. And there is a God who loves me and cares for me, and that really happens to me. So that, I think, the more real you can make a relationship like that, the more real God is going to be for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in my life, I have many friends, people I've been associated with, especially in high school, that dealt with this idea of depression, and that they don't deserve a love, and that people will not always be there for them. I think what you just described, what God is meant to be, that confidant, that reassurance, is hard for a lot of people in my generation and younger to accept, because they don't accept it about themselves. And this is, of course, generalizing a lot of information right now. I'm not trying to say if you have depression, all of a sudden you don't believe in God, but it becomes harder to believe that somebody could love you if you don't have those same feelings about yourself and can always be there for you. And I think there is a lot of that loneliness in our world, especially when, like you said, you really find God in the contemplation, the meditation, the quiet prayer. And God has told us in Scripture that that's where He is. He's in the gentle whisper of the wind, not the roaring thunder or the earthquake.
Right. Oh, yeah, that story in the Old Testament.
So is that Isaiah, I believe?
I think it's
Daniel.
I think it's Elias, or wait.
I'm not a Bible nerd, so.
I think it's the prophet Elias. Whatever book that is.
I'm a good Catholic. I know the story, but I don't know where the story is.
Oh my goodness, I'm the same way.
But yeah, so I had trouble with that myself. One of my spiritual directors told me, go do a half hour of spiritual direction, and it was the hardest thing in the world for me to start.
Okay, Scott, I'm sorry. Can you regurgitate that? I just lost you again.
Oh, no worries.
Just that last part.
Yeah, just that being silent and doing silent prayer was so hard for me. I had a spiritual director who told me to do just once a week a half hour of silent prayer, and it was the single most difficult thing I have done in my life. And I have ADHD as well, so I'm always moving around.
That's tough.
Just fidgeting, and so even right now, I'm playing with a pen in my hand. And I just remember too, I was there for 15 minutes on the floor, rocking back and forth. And I'm like, do I, is silent just with my mouth, or is it my head too? Can I play music in the background? And I was moving. And then just after struggling for 15, 20 minutes, all of a sudden just all of a sudden I was still, and I could be in prayer for like 10 minutes. And I went
Oh,
back to
that's
my,
fantastic.
thank you. Yeah. I went back to field director. I'm like, I did it. And
You
he was
know,
like, great, do it for longer next time. And I was like, oh, wait, that wasn't the plan. Hold on.
but that's it, right? It's the persistence.
Yeah.
You got to persist. You have to persevere because he's there. I mean, we came from him, right? And that's the whole point. All of this came from that thing, that first source. And that first source had to be personal. There has to be consciousness there, because where did our consciousness come from? Right? And it's somebody who's got to understand us, because how do we understand everything? You know, everything we have, everything, the way we operate comes absolutely and completely from something, so from that source. We get everything we have from that source, which means he's someone you can communicate with, you know?
Yes.
So if you could just persist. And the other lovely thing about this, God made us so he could have a relationship with us, which is why he gave us consciousness and the ability to relate in the first place, right? And to know him, which means he's pursuing us at the same time that we're pursuing him. And he's pursuing us even with greater urgency. You know, there's this lovely line from Saint's Confessions that says, "Too late have I loved thee, beauty so ancient yet so new, too late have I loved thee." And a favorite writer of mine uses that piece for this article on beauty, finding beauty. Anyway, the way he uses it is, he says, our response to God always comes late, in that it is a response. It's a response. We only love God because he first loved us. So the silence, or attempt to just sit there and be still and quiet everything, is simply to find that thing, that pursuit, or to come in contact with the pursuit that's already there. You know, God is pursuing us. We just have to find it. We have to come into contact with it.
Yeah, we feel like we have to be the ones to find God.
Yes.
Even though he's already found us. And I like what you're saying about a response. That leads me to my last question, which is, how are we meant to respond to God? Like, if we already have this idea, like, okay, like how do I know God is real? Okay, I understand your proof and I accept it, and I accept the relationship. But now what is my response meant to be to God now that I do acknowledge his existence in whatever factor that might be? What is our response to God?
Yeah, good question. I think our knee-jerk reaction is, okay, we have to do something for him, right? Or we have to do what he wants us to do, because we expect, well, if he's coming after us or he's pursuing a relationship, it's because he wants us to behave a certain way. Or
make it sound like the IRS, like he's pursuing us, he's coming after us.
Right, exactly. And also we get the sense of God. We get such a sense of God from our parents, right? And our parents, you know, they're authoritarian. They want us to do things. Typically, they don't know how to love us unconditionally. So they're saying, well, you know, to be a good person, you got to do this, that, and the other thing. So we expect God will be the same way. But in fact, he's not. We don't really have to do anything much. I mean, obviously you have to understand that you have to avoid sin and things that are going to take you away from God, right? You have to make that time to get in touch with him, etc.
It's different than how faith compels you to these certain actions, you know, and acceptance of God and being in a relationship with him. He doesn't require anything else of you in that relationship.
Exactly. Well, right. So rather than to do something, I think what he wants of us, or the most appropriate response to God, is just that, to respond, meaning to accept his love, to feel it, to believe it, to know that we are loved by him. Because that's when the relationship is really going to grow, right? Because when you know you're in the presence of somebody who just adores you. I mean, if you've ever been in a relationship, like a romantic relationship, where your partner is just so, he adores you, right? Or he's just so full of love. You have to receive the love, and that's the greatest gift that you can be, or to bring to somebody in a relationship, I think, is to receive their love. And I think that's what God wants most from us, is just to know we are loved, to receive it, and to be grateful for it. And then the relationship's going to grow from that. And then everything else falls right into place. Like Augustine says, love and do what you will.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, I think about the idea of just like being in the presence of somebody you love. And I should probably talk about my wife right now, but I want to talk about my dog. My dog, Basil, he is the most crazy pitsky you will ever meet. And and when I got him, that was my first like introduction into like really taking care of another living being, like a parent. And I had to learn that, like, you know, he'd be barking at me in my face, and he was like really young puppy and running around crazy and like nipping at my ankle. And I would be like, what are you doing this for? And I had to ask myself, like, have his needs been met? Like, have I put in work in this relationship of ours? And as he got older, in a few months, we would go on our daily walk. And even still this day, he immediately naps when we get home from our walk. But when he was really young, he would always nap on top of me. My wife would be at work. I always had like afternoons or so off. And if I ever moved, he was instantly up and like a crazy puppy again. He could have slept for 10 minutes and he would be running around again. So I had a system where I would like get my snacks, get my remote control, get my PlayStation control, and so I couldn't move. I had everything I needed right there. But I would look at him on me, and just like, he is so content. Even to this day, he'll sleep on the bed with us sometimes. He's so content just being with us. Like, if my wife and I are in the living room and my wife leaves to the bedroom, he follows. He just has to be with us, and then he'll lay back down. He just needs to be with me, and he is the happiest creature in the world.
And I'm sure that does so much for you. Like, you're just, oh my goodness, this dog really loves me, you know?
Yes.
And it's kind of like a baby too. A baby doesn't have to do anything.
Oh, we baby him so much. Oh my gosh.
But, you know, a baby doesn't have to do anything. He just has to be. He just has to be in the mother's arms and accept the mother's love. And that's what makes her happy. If he tried to do something for her, I mean, he would just frustrate her, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Because he's not in the position to do it, but he's just lovable just as he is. And that is who we are. We are lovable to God just how we are. And he wants us to accept that love. Because after all, as we were saying, if God manifests himself in his creation, and every part of creation or aspect of creation reveals an aspect of God, that's true for us too.
Yeah.
We're an aspect of God. We're a revelation of God. And so just being that is beautiful and lovely and lovable, you know?
Absolutely.
To God. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that is a great way to end this. Okay. On that note of the relationship and how perfect it is. And I think at the end there, we really hit the nail on the head. Like that's what we are seeking out. Whatever proof you need, that's okay. And that is the end goal, just that perfect relationship.
Yeah.
All right. Well, usually we end in prayer. Normally we ask the guest to lead. Do you feel comfortable? Do you think your mic will stay on for a whole prayer?
Yeah, I think so. And do you have any particular prayer that, I mean, I'm thinking since we talked about God, the Our Father.
That sounds great. Please, if you wouldn't mind leading
Okay.
us and our listeners in our Father.
Okay. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And by the way, can I say, I hope I'm not taking up too much time, but
Oh, no, you're
I always
fine.
love this prayer because Christ taught it to us, which means that when Christ taught us the Our Father, he was sharing his own love of the Father, which must have been amazing. I mean, because it's infinite. He knows
Yes.
how beautiful and lovable the Father is. And so then he teaches us how to pray to him
Absolutely.
in these words. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Father, Son, Spirit, amen. I think your microphone cut out at the very end there.
Your microphone for the last time.
But thank you so much for joining us, Karen. I definitely learned a lot, and I hope that everybody listening in, actually, I know that everybody listening in has absolutely learned something as well about why we can know that God is real.
Oh, I hope so. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. And God bless everything you're doing for the Catholic youth.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you even more. All right. Have a great day, Karen.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.